There's a popular game named Cards Against Humanity. It's kind of like Apples to Apples. Most of you probably know it. I'm going to read through some of the cards. Silence. The illusion of choice in a late-stage capitalist society. Late-stage capitalists, so they have Marxist language. They have Marxist terminology in here right from card number 2. Many bats. Hot Asian men. I guess that's supposed to be funny because the joke here is that usually maybe Asian men are not quite as attractive. And so this card, Hot Asian Men, is supposed to be like like it's different than you would expected. It's different than you expected. It's a kind of a backhanded compliment like that. Shame, website, assaulting a police officer, sorry excuse for a father. Okay, so we've gotten through the first 9 cards, and we have Marxist terminology and some kind of a racial dig that's also sexualizing men, making men into an object of desire when usually it's the other way around. And then also bad fathers. So that's where we are after the first 9 cards. Seeing what happens when you lock people in a room with hungry seagulls. And this is supposed to be funny because I guess the seagulls would attack people, and it'd be a very silly situation. It'd be silly, but also really terrible. So with this card, the joke is like you're laughing at their suffering. You're laughing at the pain of these people who are being attacked by seagulls. A crucifixion. So this is mocking Jesus, mocking the crucifixion, because of course this is an inherently... Every one of these cards is something that's supposed to be mocked. That's how the game works. A narc, boneless buffalo wings, the live studio audience complaining, doing crimes, COVID-19, crippling debt, daddy issues. Okay, so here again we have more on the bad fathers or absent fathers theme, and that being something to be laughed at. Working in an Amazon warehouse, a fart so powerful that it wakes the giants. So here it's there's something gross and embarrassing, and then but exaggerated to a huge extent. That's maybe the biggest theme in this game. They take things that are a little bit disgusting or embarrassing and they laugh at that. President Bush, nudity, covering myself with Parmesan cheese and chili flakes because I am a pizza, so something absurd, laying an egg. And laying an egg, of course, this is supposed to be subtly implying vaginas or something sexual, and that's supposed to be funny. Getting naked, so more implied sexuality, and watching cartoons, so more absurdity. Combining cartoons with being naked. Pretending to care. That's interesting. Seeing grandma naked, and here's another thing, it's a violation. It's something that would cause sort of a moral disgust, and they're laughing at that too. Making light of the sacred, as it like mocking the crucifixion, and making light of things that would be sort of serious, and dismissing any kind of emotion of shame or disgust. That's why they have this shame card, so they laugh at that. Laughing at the crucifixion, of course. Laughing at an absent father, which would really be something very serious, not something to laugh at. And a fart, so this is something that's unclean and disgusting, and they want people to think of that in a very exaggerated way. Having big dreams, but no realistic way to achieve them. Boogers, more grossness. The Confederate flag. The Miracle of Childbirth. And again, mocking it. So if you were the kind of person who would look at childbirth as a miracle, look at it as something really positive and miraculous, and feel some sort of connection to God or some kind of connection to seriousness and kind of a sacred attitude, they like laughing at that. Laughing at a positive attitude. Having a stroke, white privilege, the blood of Christ, of course, more sacrilegious stuff, more of that. Emerging from the sea and rampaging through Tokyo, the Hamburglar, Axe, body spray, soft, kissy, missionary sex, Batman. So this soft and kissy, this is supposed to mean that it's very intimate. And so again, very intimate sex you might feel more seriousness and more of a sense of the sacred, and they like ridiculing that, laughing at that, similar to how they sort of laugh off any sense of violation you would feel if you saw your grandma naked, and laughing off the embarrassment or disgust you would feel at this ridiculous stuff here. Or similarly, watching kids' cartoons and making that sexual somehow, that's also a violation, and they're laughing that off as well. The big theme of the game is that it opposes a sense of sanctity. Opposes a sense of sanctity, and specifically it greets people with a sense of sanctity by laughing at them and ridiculing them and trying to ridicule them out of having that sense of sanctity. Batman, more kind of absurd, exaggerated, childish silliness. Or rather, having like an adult being really enthusiastic about Batman would be childish and kind of silly. Agriculture, barely making $25,000 a year. Natural selection, boomers, gross pooping stuff. And then this situation with a woman who has an abusive boyfriend, but she's not really honest with herself about the situation. Prescription painkillers, laughing off drug addiction, swooping, mansplaining. We all know where this kind of terminology comes from. A homoerotic volleyball montage. This is another one where it's not just guys playing volleyball. They add in this sexual element in order to ridicule it a little bit, but also to ridicule the seriousness and sort of sense of sacredness that might be associated with sex. And then they ridicule that by putting it in the context of volleyball. And specifically, they put it in the context of like just casually watching some volleyball montage video. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez putting things where they go, holding a pepper grinder for some reason, all you could eat shrimp, an old guy who's almost dead. So this is a case, again, where there's a guy who's coming to the end of his life. Maybe he should, most people in that situation would be reflecting on their lives, thinking about what they did and what they're leaving behind and maybe where they're going. So another thing that would evoke a sense of sacredness, sanctity, and the creators of this game like ridiculing that, putting it in with these disgusting, gross things and absurd and silly things in order to make the situation of coming to the end of your life something that's a subject of laughter and absurdity and ridicule rather than something sacred. Kanye West, hot cheese. This hot cheese thing is also supposed to be sexual or at least gross. At the very least, gross in the sense of being physically like sticky and messy. And I'm sure it was put in here I'm sure this card was put in here to be part of a sexual innuendo as well. Getting serial killed. Yep. Another very serious thing, serial killers mixed in with absurdity and other stuff. A middle-aged man on roller skates. Alcoholism, smegma, and people dying from a disaster. Looking in the mirror, applying lipstick, and whispering, "Tonight you will have sex with Tom Cruise." This would be a very sad thing. I guess this woman is very lonely or unsatisfied with whatever men are in her league. More to the point, a woman who was doing this would be like living in fantasy in her own head rather than actually dealing with life. A woman who did this would be avoiding reality by slipping into these absurd jokes and fantasy, but not just slipping into fantasy, but slipping into laughing at everything and not taking anything seriously and making everything absurd, and doing that in order to avoid facing the actual problems and maybe shortcomings that she has in her life. She likes absurd humor as a substitute to taking life seriously. And also, this game as a whole, Cards Against Humanity, is made by and played by people who are doing the same thing. People who like this kind of humor, who like this absurd violation humor, because they like not taking these seriously. They like doing this weird, gross, sort of rebellious, but more like they're pushing against reality itself, like they are making everything absurd and making fun of everything because they are dissatisfied with the things that they have. They like this kind of humor because they like to escape into this silly, absurd, making a joke of everything rather than taking life seriously. Just like the woman who would do this. A lot of these cards are really, I would say they're self-aware, but they're probably not. They're probably unintentionally revealing. Grabbing my man by his love handles and fucking his big ass. Making sex something ridiculous, and also denigrating the man. I don't think any man would like to be described in this way. And since sex is something that people are vulnerable and sensitive about, ridiculing someone in a sexual situation is an especially biting form of ridicule. Stuffing my pee hole with Tic Tacs. Okay. Self-loathing. Sitting on my face and telling me I'm garbage. So more people ridiculing each other during sex. Half-ass, same thing. The Holy Bible. Yeah, more of that. German dungeon porn. Being on fire. Teenage pregnancy. Gandhi, your weird brother. Birth control. Nasty shit, like real anorection that lasts longer than 4 hours, and more ridiculing people when they're most vulnerable. A three-way with my wife and a really, really tall man. Most men, I think, would feel kind of insecure around a really tall guy. The past, my genitals, an endless stream of diarrhea, science, not reciprocating oral sex, flightless birds, a good sniff, permanent orgasm face disorder. And here's another one where they're like, maybe they're interacting with someone just in day-to-day activities, and then they introduce this thinking about sex, introducing some sexual element into their day-to-day activities when they should be focused on something else. And the introduction of the sexual element blurs the distinction between sexual situations and non-sexual situations, thus kind of wearing down the sense of specialness you would feel in sexual situations. Pepsi, irritable bowel syndrome, Oprah, wondering if it's possible to get some of that salsa to go, bananas, passive-aggressive post-it notes, me jubbly bubblies. Would this be someone making fun of themselves for being fat? This also sounds like making jokes of things rather than facing their problems. Peeing a little bit, wet dreams, the Jews, my cheating son of a bitch husband, the only gay person in 100 miles, having sex for the first time, another very vulnerable, very special thing that's supposed to be the target of ridicule in this game. Kissing grandma on the forehead and turning off her life support. Here they could be talking about, I guess, just murdering her. And then the game would be mixing murder with, you should feel a sense of horror at murder, even hearing about someone else doing it or seeing it in a movie, you should still feel a sense of horror at it. And here they wear down that sense of horror by mixing it in with all this absurd or sexual or childish, but mostly just absurd and silly stuff. Or they could be talking about maybe grandma's really old and it's just time for, rather than dragging on her life, they're turning off the life support, which could be a fine choice, but that's another situation which should be very serious and very solemn. And this game wears down the sense of solemnity by mixing a solemn situation in with all this other stuff. An AR-15 assault rifle, my good bra, punching a congressman in the face, saying everything okay when everything is clearly not okay. This one, so there's some problem, but they don't want to face their problem, so they say, oh, it's okay. Being rich, floating down the Hudson River with the other garbage. This is saying something like they're calling themselves garbage. This is something I've seen a lot. A certain kind of person calling themselves trash or calling themselves garbage sort of as a joke, but it's also sort of that they recognize something bad about... They recognize that there is something bad about themselves, but rather than actually addressing it and trying to change it, they just say, oh, I'm trash, I'm garbage. But then they say it as a joke in order to make it not serious, so they actually don't have to face it. Republicans sniffing and kissing my feet. A much younger woman, poverty, Kamala Harris, committing suicide. Yeah, that's hilarious. A loser like you. Here, introducing a really denigrating thing to say to someone. And instead of addressing, if there's somebody who says this to, if there's someone who says to another person, a loser like you, instead of seeing there's a conflict between these two people and addressing whatever the conflict is, and I know it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to address conflicts. It's uncomfortable. That's why they avoid it. And the kind of people who make this game and the kind of people who play this game avoid conflict by turning everything into a joke. And because they avoid conflict, they never actually resolve anything. And so none of their problems ever get fixed. And they just keep papering over everything with this weird, self-denigrating humor, calling themselves garbage, saying that everything is okay when everything is clearly not okay, laughing about things that should be serious, being passive-aggressive, and then making fun of everyone who does take something seriously, making fun of everyone who does have some vulnerability, making a mistake and then laughing about it. A mistake, squirting, wizard music, the Kool-Aid Man, free samples, hurting those closest to me. They think that's something to laugh about. The 3/5 compromise, lactation, laughing over champagne flutes while the poor freeze to death outside. Instead of having a conscience and trying to do the right thing in that situation or trying to fix a society that would create that kind of situation, just laughing about it and ignoring something that's extremely terrible and extremely wrong. This also relates to their views, their mistaken views about the economy. Because they have a socialist perspective where they think that the rich just got rich by exploiting or taking stuff from the poor, because they have that false view, they feel guilty that they have a comfortable life while there are poor people dying. But they don't actually have the moral courage to give up their wealth. And so they just continue in their comfortable lifestyle while ignoring the protestations of their conscience. And to cover up the protestations of their conscience, they laugh about things and do dark humor like this. That's actually one of the biggest bad things about socialism. Because rich socialists believe that their comfortable lifestyle comes at the expense of someone else, and so they feel guilty about it. And so instead of understanding that prosperity can be created, and we could work and build things and build a good life for everyone, instead of understanding that, they believe that a good life for other people can only be achieved when they give up their creature comforts. But they're not quite strong enough and not quite willing to do that, to give up their comfortable lifestyle. And so they continue living their comfortable lifestyle while feeling guilty about it, while feeling that they're terrible people. And because they're ignoring their conscience on that, their conscience on other things becomes degraded as well. And then they end up hating themselves, and they just become hypocritical, self-hating, old, rich degenerates. Meanwhile, the commoners from the heartland, the workers, the middle class, they know that it's good to... They know that it's good to have money. It's good to make money. It's good to save and achieve a good life for yourself. And that by building things for yourself, that doesn't hurt others. That actually helps others because you collaborate with them and you build things with other people. Those people have their consciences intact. Eating a hard-boiled egg out of my husband's asshole. Doing white people shit with a bunch of white people. Fucking all my dad's friends. I guess this is supposed to be like a woman who has some messed up relationship, some grievance with her dad, and she's trying to get back at her dad by going and having sex with all his friends. Drinking gasoline to see what it tastes like. Inappropriate yodeling. Puberty. Ghosts. Puberty, of course, being a sensitive, vulnerable time for most people, a time of where people are especially sensitive to embarrassment. So that's why they picked it out as a subject. That's why they picked it out here as a particular subject for ridicule. Ghosts. 50 milligrams of Zoloft daily. Zoloft is an antidepressant. More. This one also, it's almost self-aware. It's almost there, but I think still probably not quite self-aware. Fucking my sister. Braiding 3 penises into a Twizzler. More combination of absurdity with sex. The point being that sex is a point of vulnerability for people, and so combining it with absurdity is ridiculing vulnerability. Vigorous jazz hands. And actually, even vigorous jazz hands, even this one is sort of ridiculing vulnerability, because if jazz hands are like an expression of enthusiasm, or I guess jazz hands maybe are kind of silly, but applause or even yodeling for that matter, it's like a visceral expression of enthusiasm. And the more vigorous it is, the more enthusiastic the person is, and then you point to them and laugh at them when they're doing something enthusiastic in order to make fun of them. Because when they do something enthusiastic and when they admit they're enthusiastic about it, they're exposing that they actually care about something. They're admitting that they actually care about something, thus exposing some vulnerability, and the people who like Cards Against Humanity like then pointing and laughing at that person, ridiculing their vulnerability. Getting fingered. My Uber driver, Pavel Gogurt, police brutality. Another one where liberals think that police brutality is a really huge injustice and a big issue. And so, well, if you really believe that, then you should be doing something about it. The liberals don't actually sacrifice very much of their own comfort. They don't spend their own money. They don't personally lead some kind of revolution against the police. They don't personally really do much about these things that they say are problems, and so their conscience bothers them. And in order to ignore their conscience, they make... That's why this card is in this deck. In order to ignore their conscience, they put things that they think are big injustices, big moral issues, into this silly, absurd game in order to laugh at those things and dismiss those things that they think are big moral issues, in order to dismiss the discomfort that their conscience is giving them. Filling my briefcase with business stuff, preteens, my fat daughter, so like a father's love for his daughter, something very good, and then they twist it. They have to pollute it or corrupt it and have to change this to my fat daughter. Exactly what you'd expect. Expecting a burp and vomiting on the floor. A very, very embarrassing situation. Very vulnerable. An octopus giving 7 hand jobs and smoking a cigarette. That's a little bit funny, at least. My neck, my back, my pussy, and my crack. Sperm whales. The joke, of course, being that it has sperm in the name. Casually suggesting a threesome. Running out of semen. God. Yeah, okay, so lots of very gross stuff, and then God. With the purpose being to combine God. The purpose being that there's going to be some card that asks for multiple things, and you combine God and these gross things, and that's supposed to be funny. Backing over a kid with a Buick. Another thing that would be extremely sad and tragic. And rather than taking anything seriously, and rather than having the emotions that would be appropriate in that circumstance, dismissing all those emotions with absurd, dark, ridiculing humor. Establishing dominance, finger painting, old people smell, getting crushed by a vending machine, a death, but a death that would be a silly way to die, selling crack to children, how bad my daughter fucked up in her dance recital. I think another part of the culture of these people is that I think most of them are really dissatisfied with their lives. Their lives are just not put together. Their things just don't go well. And so then when something bad happens to them, they try to laugh it off. Their daughter tried to be part of this dance recital and it really didn't go well at all. And so then they're like, oh, it's just a dance recital. Who cares? It's not a big deal. And that attitude would be, I mean, like, there is a place for that. You don't want to obsess over some small thing. But if you say, oh, it's not a big deal about everything, then you're left with nothing. Then if you say that about everything, then it's like your whole life isn't a big deal. So you should say, oh, it's not a big deal about the things that actually don't really matter. But if they don't really matter, then maybe you shouldn't be doing them at all. But you can't say that about the things that actually are a big deal. There are some things that actually do matter, and you have to take those things seriously. And taking those things seriously means admitting that you care about them, which means that you have to admit to yourself that you care about whether it succeeds or fails, which means that there's a risk that it will fail, and there is a risk that you will then be unhappy if it fails. And so that's vulnerability. And you have to accept that. You have to admit to yourself that you have that vulnerability, and maybe, well, if you're visibly pursuing some goal, then you're exposing that vulnerability to other people. You're showing that you care about, if people see you working hard towards something, it shows that you care about that thing. And of course, then it shows that you care about that thing going well, going successfully. And there's a chance it could fail, in which case everyone would see that you had failed and that you would be unhappy. And then the people like this could then point at you and laugh at you and ridicule you. Rectangles, being fucking pathetic. Yeah, they're upset with their lives. They're unsatisfied with their lives. They feel like nothing is going well for them. But instead of facing that and saying, okay, well then what can I change? What can I start doing better? Instead of doing that, instead of facing their situation, they're like, oh, I'm pathetic, but it's fine. It's fine. I'm so pathetic. It's a joke when I say I'm pathetic. I say that everything is okay when actually, clearly everything is not okay. Only dating Asian women, putting children in cages, Karen. Oh, getting married, having a few kids, buying some stuff, retiring to Florida, and dying. So a whole life without ever actually doing anything that they cared about. Pixelated bukkake. A lifetime of sadness. These people have pooping in a laptop and closing it. How far I can get my own penis up my butt. Seeing my father cry. My ugly face and bad personality. You get the idea. I'm not going to finish all these. To recap, the culture which produced Cards Against Humanity opposes the sense of sanctity. When people play this game, they laugh off feelings of disgust or violation. There was the card Seeing Grandma Naked, which would make most people feel some sense of violation, and people playing this game laugh off that sense of violation. And they ridicule people who do have a sense of sanctity by combining sacred things with disgusting things or absurd things. Most of the people who play this game are deeply unhappy people, or at least they're deeply dissatisfied with life. But instead of facing that feeling, they just turn things into jokes. And because they oppose the sense of sanctity, and because they don't want to take things seriously, they pick out very serious subjects to laugh about and to ridicule in this game, because by ridiculing and laughing at those very serious things, that helps them to avoid taking anything seriously.